神秘を解き明かす。
I recently finished a book that has a different outlook on creativity than most works I've encountered so far. It's Big Magic: Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert, and I honestly liked it even more than Rick Rubin's recent bestseller, The Creative Act. Wise spiritual seeker and author of mega bestseller Eat, Pray, Love, Gilbert presents an animist view of creativity that sees ideas as living entities that choose human collaborators to help them materialize into our world. I know it might sound a bit new age, but as Gilbert articulates, this outlook on creativity has ancient roots. She poses it as an alternative to the archetype of the tortured artist, an idea originating in the Romantic period in which an artist is in a constant battle with her muse. In this video, we'll dive into 5 lessons I learned from this book about creativity. It's my first video in a while on a topic other than Japanese music, but stick around because this type of thinking is a key part of my creative process, and I think it might be helpful for you as well. Number 1, the martyr versus the trickster. At one point in the book, Gilbert offers 2 archetypes as options for a creative life: the martyr and the trickster. Related to the tortured artist archetype described above, the martyr has a very principled, austere, and at times dramatic view of his work. He's often threatened by the success of others and sees his talents as more of a curse than a gift. The rhetoric of this kind of brooding sad boy type character probably sounds familiar to you. The trickster, on the other hand, is a lot more about play and curiosity. Whereas the martyr has a clear predominance of masculine energy, the trickster is a lot more balanced and gender fluid. Rather than seeing their failures as awful, they see them as interesting experiments that help move them along. They see other creatives more as playmates and co-conspirators than as competitors. Let's hear Gilbert as she makes a very efficient comparison of these 2 archetypes.
Martyr says, I will sacrifice everything to fight this unwinnable war, even if it means being crushed to death under a wheel of torment. Trickster says, okay, you enjoy that. As for me, I'll be over here in this corner, running a successful little black market operation on the side of your unwinnable war. Martyr says, life is pain. Trickster says, life is interesting. Martyr says, the system is rigged against all that is good and sacred. Trickster says, there is no system, everything is good, and nothing is sacred.
Number 2, the central paradox. Your work matters, and it also doesn't matter. The reality is that we need both this serious, disciplined energy and this lighthearted, flexible energy in order to be successful creatives. Gilbert calls this phenomenon the central paradox. On the one hand, we must be dedicated to our work as if it's the most important thing in the world. On the other, we need to have a sense of play that recognizes that, in the survival sense, our creative work doesn't matter at all. Gilbert has this to say about how she applies this to writing.
I approach each sentence as if the future of humanity depends upon my getting that sentence just right. I care because I want it to be lovely. Therefore, anything less than a full commitment to that sentence is lazy and dishonorable. But as I edit my sentence, sometimes immediately after writing it, I have to be willing to throw it to the dogs and never look back. It matters. It doesn't matter.
Number 3, working with your genius. Another one of my favorite ideas from this book is the reinforcement of this ancient notion that your ideas come from something that is fundamentally not you. In ancient Europe, an artist was said to have a genius, not to be a genius. A genius was this separate house elf type entity in an artist's studio, patiently waiting for the right moment to chime in and give a little help when the artist shows that they're ready for it. Gilbert points out that eudaimonia, the Greek notion of the highest state of human happiness, directly translates to being well demoned. That is, being well taken care of by another spiritual force. And note that I mean the more morally neutral demon and not the decidedly less morally neutral demon.
The idea of an external genius helps to keep the artist's ego in check, distancing him somewhat from the burden of taking either full credit or full blame for the outcome of his work. If your work is successful, in other words, you are obliged to thank your external genius for the help, thus holding you back from total narcissism. And if your work fails, it's not entirely your fault. You can say, hey, don't look at me, my genius didn't show up today.
Number 4, keep your day job. Perhaps my favorite part about Elizabeth's point of view is that these ideals are counterbalanced by a real sense of pragmatism. While she does recommend a creative life to anyone interested, she does not recommend relying on a creative career to give you a steady paycheck. For that, she had a long stream of day jobs, teaching, and magazine work before finally moving to writing full-time.
There's no dishonor in having a job. What is dishonorable is scaring away your creativity by demanding that it pay for your entire existence. This is why whenever anyone tells me they're quitting their day job in order to write a novel, my palms get a little sweaty. This is why when anyone tells me that their plan for getting out of debt is to sell their first screenplay, I'm like, yikes. Write that novel, yes. Definitely try to sell that screenplay. I hope with all my heart that good fortune finds you and showers you with abundance, but don't count on the payoff, I beg of you, only because such payoffs are exceedingly rare, and you might very well kill off your creativity by holding it to such a harsh ultimatum.
Number 5, have an affair with your creativity. The last point I'll share from the book speaks to how to logistically make room for creativity in your life while keeping up with all of your other social responsibilities. She uses a bit of a tricky metaphor, but let's hear her out on it.
You know how people who are having extramarital affairs always seem to manage to find time to see each other in order to have wild, transgressive sex? It doesn't seem to matter if those people have full-time jobs and families at home to support. They still somehow always manage to find the time to sneak off and see their lover, no matter what the difficulties, the risks, or the costs. Even if they get only 15 minutes together in a stairwell, they will take that time and they will make out with each other like crazy. Let yourself fall in love with your creativity like that and see what happens.
Though this metaphor illustrates the point efficiently, it's not my favorite because it might imply that breaking commitments to real people and real relationships in your life is the only path to peak creative experiences. Like, what about the spouse that gets cheated on or the kids that don't get picked up from school? On the contrary, I think it's important to reinforce the idea I first encountered in Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. The idea that creative people can also be reliable and responsible toward their loved ones and communities. She makes reference to this as part of a list debunking some cultural stereotypes about artists.
Artists are drunk, crazy, broke, irresponsible, promiscuous. Artists can be sober, sane, solvent, responsible, faithful.
That said, what the metaphor does get right is this sense that creativity shouldn't be seen as a burdensome extra job that drains us, but rather a wondrous energy that can't help but grow out like dandelions in the cracks of this sidewalk that is our life's structure. Gilbert talks about an illustrator couple with kids and publishing jobs who wake up each morning an hour before their children wake up to sit across from each other and draw. One might say it's a very illustrative example.
Go hide in that stairwell and make out with your art. Slip away from everyone else at the party and go off to dance alone with your ideas in the dark. Wake yourself up in the middle of the night in order to be alone with your inspiration while nobody is watching. You don't need that sleep right now. You can give it up.
So there are my 5 takeaways from Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I highly recommend it for those interested in learning about a more mystical and animist outlook on creativity. As I hope I've shown with the clips from it here, listening to the audiobook narration by Elizabeth herself is extra special. Please go give it a listen or read and let me know in the comments if you'd like for me to make more videos about creativity in the future. Until next time, じゃあね.